that they've exercised this muscle, so to speak. And so I'm excited about Friday night. I'd encourage you to attend, and hope to see you there.
Thanks, Katie. We have a relationship with this ministry in Rwanda, and some of you know some of the history of Rwanda, but it's a partnership, which means that they can learn some things from us and we can learn some things from them. One of the things we can learn is what Katie expressed, and that's when you get prayed for, you feel prayed for, and there's a depth of experience, perhaps because of their background or for whatever reason, that most of us American evangelicals have never experienced. So if you want to take your prayer life up a notch, I promise you aren't going to do anything crazy, wild, but we're going to sit under Fred, and he will teach. We will worship together, and we will pray together. So that's from 7 to 10. You'll read about it in your bulletin on the front page. Also on the front page today at 5:30. You know, it's such a beautiful day. Some of you are going to go out to eat. You're going to do something. You're going to go home, put your little gardening clothes on, and you're going to plant some flowers or whatever. You knock yourself out, but at 5:30, if you're new, we want to invite you back here for some food. Just stay in your gardening clothes, and it's very casual. It's to get to know the pastor, the staff, some of the other people, some of the ministries, and to answer the question, how might we connect with one another at First Baptist? So that's what that is all about. Well, let me invite you to take your notes out of the bulletin of this morning's message. Several of the scriptures we will read are printed there. And if you have your Bibles, you can go now to Matthew chapter 12. We're going to jump to Matthew 12 toward the end of the message and look at what Jesus has to say on this topic. I started a series last week called Dumb and Dumber Christians. I did this because, and I entitled it this, because what I'm seeing in the world and even among Christians, obviously information and knowledge is increasing at an astronomical rate. Everybody knows more stuff. But at the same time, it seems that wisdom is decreasing. It's going down. It's like people are getting dumber. And Christians, I see them making decisions that seem so far from what the Bible teaches, so far from biblical and godly wisdom. And would you not say that God is pretty smart, not just intelligent, but He knows when to do stuff. He knows how to do stuff. He knows the right way to do stuff. And we have a lot to learn from God, and Proverbs is one book called a book of wisdom. Now let me just give you a little piece of advice about reading Proverbs. I suggested that we read Proverbs in the typical way, which is every day of the month. Today is the 18th, so we read chapter 18. Tomorrow's the 19th, we read chapter 19 until we finish the entire book. And I hope you're keeping up with that schedule. It's not a rough schedule, but one of the things about Proverbs is it's not a story. There's just isolated Proverbs, and it jumps all over the place, and so you might have read this week and realized, wow, I don't remember anything I read. Well, it's hard to, so let me just give you this one little kernel of advice. Read your chapter, and identify as you read through the chapter one proverb that hits home. One proverb, and wherever you are in your life, it seems to ring true for you. Then finish the chapter and go back and reread that verse. And then read it again, and perhaps even write it out, commit it to memory. Now, I don't want to be a legalist or stickler on this, but I will promise you this. If you will do that with one of the Proverbs that seems to hit home, God will continue to drill that into your life. And that's what I've done with Proverbs for many, many years. The goal is that we could think like God and become wise. I told you last week that every week I'm going to share with you something stupid that I did. I started by telling you that I ran over Katie's foot. The one who spoke this morning, she's the one I ran over her foot in the line picking her up from school. I felt pretty bad. Well, I'll tell you another story, not quite as good, but still, what were you thinking, Bruce, kind of a thing. I was just graduated from seminary. I was in a church in California as an associate pastor, and a woman had asked me if I would visit her dying husband in the hospital. I had never met this man, and she says he was not a Christian. It was sort of like He's on his deathbed. Could you go and talk with him, pray for him, and try to see if you can get him ready to meet his Maker? And so, I'm a little scared, a little nervous about that. I mean, how would you feel if this kind of weight was put on your shoulders? So here I am, I'm at the hospital, I stop at the desk, give him the name, give me the room number, I go up to the room, check the board, go in there, there's 2 beds, one of them is occupied, and so I go and start talking to this guy. He's semi-conscious, he can hear and he can nod, but he definitely is on his deathbed. And, in seminary, they tell you certain things to say, try to break the ice and get into a conversation about God and so on. And I tried every trick, but there was just no making much headway. I felt awkward. I could tell he felt awkward as I was approaching the subject of death, of dying, and of God. And so after a few minutes, I prayed for him and left. And it was about time I got to the parking lot, the thought hit me, I'll bet that's not even the guy. Turns out it wasn't. I don't know if the guy that I was supposed to meet was in the bed next to him, but he was down getting x-rays or something. And so it was the right room, but it was the wrong guy. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, brother, if I meet this guy in heaven, he's going to have some questions for me. Like, what were you thinking? You can say the right things, but to the wrong person. Or at the wrong time. You can obviously say the wrong things, And James, the half-brother of Jesus, had a few things to say about the tongue. And I wanted to start there, and we'll get to Proverbs in just a moment. Look at James chapter 3, verse 2. I quoted this in your notes. He says this, "We all stumble in many ways. If anyone is never at fault in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to keep his whole body in check." All of us use our tongue to give messages. I wanted to share with you a pastor friend of mine from Montana sent me an email and had some pieces of communication. It was signs that people have taken pictures of. And so I wanted to show you this one because it related to the sheep that jump off the cliff. If one sheep goes off, they all go off, the herd thing that I talked about last week. Well, I've never seen this, a cow sign. How many of you have seen a cow fall on a car before? I mean, what is this about? This one, I really like, stop. And then it says no stopping anytime. The next one, one way. The next one, I love, this is in California. Should I go to college or should I smoke weed? And this is the picture after I passed the sign. It says speed limit 50, and then it clocked me at 167. That's not me. This guy went to the weed college. Don't drink. I just had to throw this one in there. This is in Wyoming, of course. I could see myself doing that. All right, next one. This is my favorite. This is in Korea, Japan, China, I don't know. It's a restroom sign, and I don't know if you can read it back there. It says, "Go back toward your behind." It's funny, but James says we all stumble in many ways. There's not one of us that is perfect when it comes to our tongue. All right, don't raise your hand, but wouldn't you agree that we have all roasted ourselves without meaning to, put our foot in our mouth? We've all gone this direction. In fact, James says that the tongue is like a bit in a horse's mouth. It's not very big, but it can control this huge animal. Or the rudder on a large ship is not very big compared to the ship, but it can give it direction. Or a spark that lights a forest fire. And he says all three of these, the tongue is a very small part of your body, but it can sink your ship. Loose lips sink ships and can turn the course of your life even, or someone else gossiping perhaps about you. And so James says we all stumble in many ways. And then he says in verse 8, look at there, it says, "But no man can tame the tongue." And so this message today, Taming the Tongue,